It's week 4. Hopefully we have these games going off. Welcome to football in 2020. Welcome to Back Sports Page Sunday Morning Fantasy. I'm Ryan Stern. Joined with me is Tom Bennett and Derek Mountain. Good morning, guys.
Morning. How's it going?
What's up, Ryan?
Doing well. We already have had our first COVID cancellation now of the season with Pittsburgh and Tennessee. We're still up in the air about New England and Kansas City. Between those 4 teams, if these games don't get played, that's a lot of issues and a lot of players that you thought you were going to have this week that you're not going to have in your lineups. I mean, so I know there was something that I had heard that I actually, as the commissioner of 2 leagues, I put out there, and the other members of the league, and obviously now with Tennessee and Pittsburgh already being canceled, but with New England and Kansas City, there's a lot of fantasy options in those games. And with there still not being any definitive answer, especially if we don't hear anything over the next 2 hours. Right now, it's about 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. We have 2 hours until the 1 o'clock games kick off. So the other members of the league, if they wanted to play one of the players on Kansas City, one of the players on New England, they could keep them in their lineup, but email me a designated player. So if you're watching now, reach out to your commissioner. Let's see if that can be an option in your league, because I know I have Clyde Edwards-Helaire on a couple teams. I have Travis Kelce. I have Patrick Mahomes on my dynasty team. On my dynasty team, my other quarterback is Gardner Minshew. So obviously, I'm playing Patrick Mahomes if they're playing. Since there's so much uncertainty, I didn't want, and I'm not even the commissioner of the dynasty league, but so I reached out to the commissioner, and he actually had agreed to this. Have somebody that is designated that the commissioner can put in the lineup should the Kansas City New England game get canceled after the 1 o'clock games kick off. If you keep the players on New England or Kansas City in your lineup and they play, those are the points you get. This is just in case it gets canceled, that you're covering yourself. You shouldn't have to be penalized for the NFL not making a decision before these 1 o'clock games. So get in touch with your commissioner. See if this could be an option for your league to have someone designated to go in just in case. So let's look at some of the guys that are in the New England Kansas City game that, should it not be an option, right now, I think there's at least a 50% chance this game does not get played. We need to see the testing that comes back today, how many positive tests. We saw 1 on each side. We saw Cam Newton and we saw Jordan Ta'amu, who's the practice squad quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs. So if there are any more positive tests, there's a good chance that this game does not get played. Let's look at some of the pivot options for some of these players. So we got to start off with obviously the number 1, and that's going to be Patrick Mahomes. So which guys are you looking at in terms of streaming options at the quarterback position? Guys that are less than 50% owned in some of the leagues, that have matchups that you like, that should you think that there is not going to be a chance Mahomes plays. Who would you go with? We'll start off with you, Derek.
One of the guys that I would definitely target that we're going to talk about later is Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean, we could do this every week with Seattle's defense moving forward. Their secondary is an absolute train wreck right now, but Fitz has looked good the last 2 weeks. And, I mean, he surprised a lot of guys on Thursday Night Football. Completing 90% of his passes against Jacksonville. He's really efficient, even pretty good on the ground, and he had a touchdown on the ground. But this is a guy that I tend to feel like, as a vet and how seasoned he is, he's going to carve up these weak defenses. He knows where to put the football. He's a smart player. It's when Fitz gets comfortable and he is the starter moving forward, he'll get overmatched over a season. But for this week's matchup, it doesn't get that much better than Seattle in Miami today.
Yeah, and you mentioned we can start doing this every week with the Seattle defense. I think we can start doing this every week with Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean, obviously, some of the bad matchups, he didn't do well against New England. He's also been hit or miss. He has had some games that he's had success against New England. But then he's had success in the other two games against Tennessee, against Jacksonville. Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to, and again, we'll get a little bit more into Ryan Fitzpatrick later on, but he's someone that I think can be a streamable option throughout the season. Tom, who are you looking at?
Definitely.
Yeah, so for my guy, I got Kirk Cousins. He's a guy that is not in a lot of the leagues that I'm in. He's on the waiver wire. He's playing the Houston Texans this week. Not the greatest defense in the world, and he puts up numbers in garbage time. You know, he had that one really bad week in week 2 versus the Colts, who are a really good defense. But in week 1 versus the Packers, he dropped 22 on ESPN scoring, and on week 3, he dropped 21. And I just think that he's got enough weapons to keep him going.
Yeah, and a lot of the issues, especially over the first 2 weeks that Kirk Cousins was having, was they couldn't find anybody opposite Adam Thielen to really gain any momentum as the wide receiver too. We saw that change last week. Justin Jefferson, 7 catches, over 100 yards, touchdown. I think they were expecting to not have to use Justin Jefferson this early. He is a little bit more of a raw talent, but the dude is still really talented, and I think he showed last week he's able to take on the workload that they had drafted him for. Obviously, he was a different receiver than Stephon Diggs, and a lot of people were looking at him as, oh, well, here's the Stephon Diggs replacement. Justin Jefferson played over 90% of his snaps in college out of the slot. So, and that's where Thielen thrives. So I think a lot of people were expecting it to be a little bit more of a longer transition period for Justin Jefferson, but we saw him play almost exclusively on the outside last week, and he had a ton of success. So I think Justin Jefferson is definitely someone we can look at to stash and maybe play later on in the season. But yeah, I definitely like Kirk Cousins against those Houston Texans. Running backs. So I'm sure Rex Burkhead was picked up in a lot of leagues. I'm sure Sony Michel was either owned or was picked up again. They're still in the stratosphere of the players that you would be mixing in your flex anyway. But the one player, again, now back to the Kansas City Chiefs, is going to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We'll start off this time with Tom. Who are some of the guys that you're looking at that could be available on the waiver wire to fill in for a Clyde Edwards-Helaire should this game not go on?
Yeah, so the first guy that I got is Giovanni Bernard, but he's completely contingent on whether Joe Mixon plays or not. He's been the leading receiver, I think, in at least one of the games in the past 2 weeks, and he could be a solid flex play. And if Mixon does go down, he is going to get a lot more touches and get that volume play. But if Mixon does play, a guy that I've seen get dropped very recently in a lot of leagues was Carryon Johnson. But you know, he was getting dropped because Adrian Peterson was getting all these touches and Swift was getting all these touches. But last week's, I think Swift saw like 6 touches or four plays or something. I don't know. He just saw a huge dip, and all of those touches that he had went to Carryon Johnson. So if you're looking for a last minute scramble pickup, either of those two guys would be a solid pick in my eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sorry, Derek.
Oh, you're good.
That Detroit backfield is such an enigma because I think it's pretty obvious. The most talented player in that backfield is getting the least amount of touches with DeAndre Swift. There's just something, I don't know if it's his blitz pickup. He's dropped a couple passes out of the backfield, but he's still the most talented, and they just keep feeding the ball to Adrian Peterson. Carryon Johnson obviously still has a lot of draft value. Can definitely. It's all contingent on the game plan. Who are you looking at, Derek?
I think it's never ideal if you're looking to stream running backs, just because we see there aren't good options on the waiver wire unless injuries happen. One guy that's going to be available in just about any league that I think is a decent flex play and maybe a very deep league, and if you're banged up, is Gus Edwards on Baltimore. I mean, they have a 3-headed monster in that backfield. It's Mark Ingram, it's Dobbins, it's Edwards, and everyone wants to talk about Dobbins and his value long term, which I think he has great value to stash in later in the season. He's the most talented guy in that backfield, but Gus Edwards has the most yards through 3 weeks in that backfield. And they're going into Washington today without Chase Young, Matt Ioannidis on their front line. They should be up by 2 or 3 scores after last week, and they should be running the football the entire second half. And I think Gus Edwards is in line for 10, 12 touches, and you hope he scores on one of them. That's about the best you could hope for in a streamable option in the running back position.
Yeah, like I said, you took my guy. I think that he is he's almost now the safest play to actually get production. We've seen week 1 it was J.K. Dobbins. Week 2 it was Mark Ingram in terms of the lead, but Gus Edwards was still integrated into the game plan throughout. Like you said, I think in a positive game script, I think they're going to look to Edwards a lot. So yeah, that's definitely someone that I am interested in. Should I have to look that way? One name, two names that I'm actually looking at. One is Chase Edmonds. We've seen pass catching running backs just tear apart the Carolina Panthers so far. Last week, I mean, was Austin Eckler was he have 11 out of 11 receptions on 11 targets. I mean, Chase Edmonds he's not obviously the same skill as Austin Eckler, but that's a very similar game plan that Chase Edmonds can handle. So he's definitely someone I can look at. And another one that I like, look to see if someone dropped Jeff Wilson if he had been picked up, because a lot of owners were worried about with Jerick McKinnon coming back into the lineup, is that going to mean less Jeff Wilson? I don't think so this week, especially against Philly. I think they're going to want to establish the run early on, and this way it opens things up for Nick Mullins. Jerick McKinnon is more of your gadget style runner, even though he was able to run through the Giants. Everyone does. Jeff Wilson, I think, is definitely someone that you could be able to play as well. Now, this one may be the tougher position to look at. And that's, what if you're the Travis Kelce owner? And a lot of Travis Kelce owners only have Travis Kelce on their roster at the tight end position. To me, there's only one name that I'm excited about that could be available, and that's Jimmy Graham. I think a lot of people, obviously he's had the success in the red zone. But he hasn't put up the total yardage numbers yet, which has scared some people away from picking him up. I mean, he's the only one right now at that position that would excite me. I would have liked Mo Alley Cox, but they just the Indianapolis Colts just reactivated Trey Burton for some reason because they think he's good. Maybe I don't know. But so I think with Burton getting activated this week, that it's going to cut into the snaps of Mo Alley Cox. Derek, who do you like as a possible tight end streamer?
I do think Mo Alley Cox is still a good stream option because he did play alongside Doyle last week and have 50 yards and a touchdown. But if he's not available, I would actually circle back to Gronk, who a lot of people gave up on. And it's not the sexiest option at all. But I think for this week, without Chris Godwin and without Leonard Fournette, I think they lean on a guy like Gronk more. Scotty Miller is questionable. Gronk had 6 catches last week for 48 yards. He played over 90% of the snaps. I think this is a long-term play with Gronk and how Arians is going to load manage Gronk almost. He hasn't looked as fast and explosive as his New England days. We know that, but this is a guy that I think later on in the season, he will see red zone work, especially with how much attention a Mike Evans is going to garner. As a streamable option, a lot of guys have probably given up on him. I've seen him in the free agency pool in just about every one of my leagues. I think he's a pretty decent play this week against the Chargers.
Tom, who are you looking at?
So my guy is a guy that's kind of come on over the past 2 weeks, and that's Robert Tonyan on the Green Bay Packers. He's got 2 touchdowns in the past 2 weeks, and last week he had 5 catches for 50 yards, one of them being that touchdown. Aaron Rodgers is starting to find his red zone threat, and with Devontae Adams, I think, still up in the air. I'm not sure if he's going to play today, but if not, that's just going to mean more targets in the red zone for this guy, and I think that he has a real connection with Rodgers.
So the real interesting thing about Robert Tonyan that will, especially if you're the Travis Kelce owner, it gives you an extra day and a half to wait until, because Tanyan plays Monday night, it gives you an extra day and a half to wait and see if Travis Kelce is going to be playing either Monday or Tuesday. Again, we don't know yet. So if they end up playing on Tuesday, you should know by Monday night that Travis Kelce is either going to be in or out of the lineup. So picking up someone like a Robert Tonyan, if you are the Kelce owner, definitely makes a lot of sense because of it leaves you more leeway into actually plugging Travis Kelce into your lineup. Guys, I think so for anyone tuning in, be sure if you have any questions about your lineups, leave them in the comments. We will answer them live on air. And it is time for studs, and sleepers. So we will start off at the quarterback position. And Derek, we'll start off with you. Who's your quarterback stud of the week?
I'm going to go with Deshaun Watson today against Minnesota. This is a guy that we've been talking about in the dud category for the last few weeks, and rightfully so. They've had an absolutely brutal first 3 weeks against Kansas City, Baltimore, and Pittsburgh. It gets much easier today against that Minnesota secondary. Those corners are still an absolute mess. No Anthony Barr for the rest of the year. And Danielle Hunter's still not in the lineup. So that O-line in Houston is a huge problem for Deshaun Watson, and it has been every single week. But that Minnesota defensive line does not stack up like the other opponents they faced the first 3 weeks. Minnesota's given up an average of 20 points per game against quarterbacks, which isn't a huge mark, but I expect this to be a competitive game and a high-scoring game. I think Deshaun Watson's a really good play today.
Yeah, I think I was really struggling between the guy that I picked and Watson as my stud of the week. So I think he gets back on track. A big thing is going to be as long as Will Fuller is able to make it through the game. Tom, who you got?
Well, right, your guy was also my guy. So before the show, we were talking about that a bit. But the guy that I'm going to go with is Jared Goff. He's a guy that's been progressing really well. He's been getting better each week. right now in ESPN leagues, he's the number 9 ranked quarterback, 11 player overall, and he's playing the Giants. And there's really not anything else to be said about that. He's going to have a good game, and I think him and Cooper Kupp are going to go off.
Yeah, I guess the only thing that would worry me is that they get up so quickly that they stop throwing the ball.
Well, I also believe Cam Akers is still
there's a good chance that part of the reason that they're up early is because of Jared Goff.
Yeah.
You may not get the volume throughout the game, but you may get enough of it in that first half that would be able to suffice you for a normal 4-quarter game. My quarterback stud is Matthew Stafford. We started to see last week Matthew Stafford get back on track with Kenny Galladay being brought into the lineup. They're going against a New Orleans team that is starting to bleed points. And I think that this was really surprising because New Orleans was one of my favorite defenses to own. They had been able to get after the quarterback, just not seeing it this year. Aside from the here and there from Cameron Jordan, but I really, really, really like the matchup with the Lions against the Saints. I like Kenny Galladay. I like Marvin Jones. I like TJ Hawkinson. I think this, and if they can get DeAndre Swift on track out of the backfield, that just opens up more options for Matthew Stafford. So he's going to be my quarterback stud of the week. Running backs, who you got, Derek?
I'm going to go with Mike Davis, who was my dud of the week last week, and he really shouldn't have been. We just weren't sure what that rep count was going to look like in that backfield. We weren't sure if they were going to integrate Curtis Samuel more, and they really didn't. All those touches that McCaffrey left on the table, most of them went to Mike Davis. He had 21 touches last week. He had 8 catches again. So the 2 weeks that he's been integrated and filled in for CMC, he's seen 8 catches in each game. And the Cardinals have given up over 200 receiving yards to opposing running backs. This is a great matchup. And in Joe Brady's offense, his vertical offense, he ties the running back into his game plan every single week as a receiver. So I love Mike Davis. He has a high floor. He's a great play against the Cardinals today.
So last week, I had Mike Davis in my flex for pretty much the entire week. Right before kickoff, we hear the news that Julio Jones is out. I decided to put Russell Gage in my flex instead of Julio Jones, and Russell Gage gets a concussion 7 minutes into the game, and I mean somehow is able to still win. But I'm like, it's one of those. Trust your first instinct. Trust your instincts. If you have someone in your lineup the entire week, trust your instincts. Tom, who you got as your running back stud?
Yeah, so my guy for this week is Jonathan Taylor. He had a little bit of a letdown versus the Jets. He only had, I believe it was like 60 rushing yards or something, but he salvaged it with a touchdown. This is the week they're going up against the Bears, who it's going to be I think a decently good scoring day for each team. And I think a lot of it's going to go to Jonathan Taylor just because Phillip Rivers is not looking like the guy he was with the Chargers. And I think that they're going to start relying a little heavier on Jonathan Taylor. Yeah,
I was expecting the Rivers T.Y. Hilton connection to be the Rivers Keenan Allen connection. And we just haven't seen that. Taylor's almost one of the most safe plays in terms of sheer volume in the NFL right now. You had said your quarterback stud was Jared Goff. I said I was a little hesitant only because I was expecting my running back stud to go off, and that's Daryl Henderson. Cam Akers is not going to play again this week for the Rams. Daryl Henderson now has 2 weeks in a row of 120 total yards, and now he gets the Giants defense. So I mean, this is my lock it in play of the week is Daryl Henderson against the Giants. Just don't think anything can go wrong for him this week. Running back studs. Oh, my cat just jumped onto my desk. Scared the hell out of me too. Running back studs. Derek, who you got?
You want to go receivers, right?
Wide receiver studs. Yeah, sorry, my cat just threw off my entire.
So you had talked about Stafford. I'm gonna go with Kenny Galladay as my stud. He is the 19th most expensive receiver on DraftKings, and that is you need to pounce on that because that just shouldn't happen. This guy's a top 10 play this week, and the Saints are without Marshawn Lattimore and Janoris Jenkins. So he's going to go against P.J. Williams, slot corner, and they're not going to shadow him. He's going to go against fill-in third and fourth corners on every snap. He had 50 yards and a touchdown last week against the Cardinals. He's going to play more snaps today and be way more involved. Kenny Galladay is a top 10 play today against the Saints.
He may be a top 5. He may be with the way that the New Orleans defensive backfield is shaking out. He may be a top 5 play this week. Absolutely love it. Tom, who you got?
So this pick goes kind of in tandem with my fill-in for Patrick Mahomes. I got Justin Jefferson. We saw him break out last week versus the Tennessee Titans, and we were already talking about the Houston Texans defense, that those corners can be exploited, and I'm really looking forward to seeing if this kid, Justin Jefferson, can put in 2 weeks in a row of just straight up balling.
Yeah. Obviously, we already talked about Jefferson, but he's and especially on DFS, he's still way undervalued compared to some of the other wide receivers that are in his price range. Mine is going to coincide with my sleeper quarterback of the week, and my wide receiver stud of the week is Devonta Parker, Miami Dolphins. We talked about Ryan Fitzpatrick and how he's going to be able to tear apart the Seattle defense. One of the reasons he's going to be able to tear it apart is because of Derek's stud tight end of the week and my stud wide receiver of the week. The Seattle defense secondary has been the worst in all of football, and now they're without Jamal Adams. I mean, it's tough to take away someone so good from a unit that's been so bad and expect them to be able to play at a higher level. My smash bet of the week is take the over. Take the over in this game. I think right now it's at 54.5. First of all, Seattle may hit that on their own.
Both of them are going over 30.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. This is. I would consider it at 64.5. Taking it. So yeah, Devonta Parker. I can easily see 100 plus 1 or 2 touchdowns. Just lock him in. Tight end studs of the week. Obviously, I spoiled the surprise, but you can, Derek, you can finish it up.
Perfect segue. I like Mike Gesicki. Seattle's weirdly covered tight ends pretty well the first 3 weeks, and I think that's just because opposing receivers have been so good.
And Jamal Adams.
Exactly. I mean, Dalton Schultz had 90 yards, but Dak had 460 against Seattle, and Gesicki's not a tight end. He's a big slot receiver in that offense. He has 60% of his snaps in the slot, so I like him and my sleeper who also plays in the slot in Miami, which we'll get into later. But we've seen slots absolutely rip apart Seattle.
Yep.
Russell Gage in week 1, Julian Edelman in week 2, and CeeDee Lamb in week 3. So it's not going to be any different this and Cedric Wilson.
Cedric Wilson.
Exactly. So it's not going to be any different this week. I think Gesicki was a little disappointing against Jacksonville on Thursday night, but he's a great play this week. I expect him to be a top 5 tight end this week. Play Gesicki against Seattle.
Yeah, I absolutely. And like I said, with Jamal Adams was one of the reasons why tight ends weren't having nearly as much success again. And also, you said wide receivers have just been able to do it. But Gesicki is sort of that wide receiver-ish tight end. So
he's not there to block. That's for sure.
No. He's their Evan Ingram. Only he actually catches touchdowns. Tom, who you got as your tight end stud?
I got another tight end that likes to catch some touchdowns, and Hunter Henry. We know the guy is injury prone, but for the first 3 weeks on ESPN Scoring, he's gotten over 10 points every week. He's a guy that Herbert's looking for as a bailout, and I feel like he's going to need to bail out a lot this week versus, I believe, Tampa Bay. And I don't think that they've covered the tight ends so well. I don't have the numbers pulled up on my screen here, but I think the guy is going to ball out.
Yeah, I mean, Hunter, he's one of the safer tight ends. He's guaranteed volume. It's all going to be about whether or not he gets into the end zone. My tight end stud of the week was my tight end dud of the week, and you should have listened to me because the New England Patriots were able to take Darren Waller out of the game. They did everything in their powers to do so, just like I had said on last week's show. But Darren Waller is going to be my tight end play of the week. He's going against Buffalo this week, but Buffalo surprisingly has allowed a lot of points and yards all around. I think we were all expecting them to be one of the top 2 or 3 defenses in terms of yards, in terms of points. But I think one of the things no one was expecting was how good the Buffalo offense was going to be, which was going to lead to a lot of negative game scripts and a lot of passing. And they've been exposed a little bit. And without Henry Ruggs, without Bryan Edwards this week, Derek Carr is going to rely on Darren Waller. I think they're going to try and move him all around, inside, outside, do whatever they can to get him open and available this week. So I am back on the Darren Waller train this week. Go to running backs. And again, for those of you tuning in, if you have lineup questions, leave them in the comments. We will pull them up and answer them on air. Running backs, duds of the week now. Quarterbacks.
Before we get to that, Ryan,
yeah,
I actually just got a text from a buddy of mine. He had a question. Pick 2 out of 3 for his running back slots. James Robinson at Cincinnati, Dave Montgomery against Indianapolis, and Chris Carson at Miami. Pick 2 out of 3.
The Miami defense has actually been surprisingly good against running backs. Week 1, obviously, they were able to give up rushing yards, but most of it was to Cam Newton. We sort of saw them keep Derrick Henry in check week 2. Obviously, we saw James Robinson have a bit of success, but I think that this is going to be with Chris Carson not 100%. I think we're going to see Carlos Hyde involved in the game more often, Travis Homer involved in the game more often, and obviously it's going to be a Russell Wilson passing game. Carson would be the one that I would sit.
Yeah, I think we're all going to agree that you have to start James Robinson from here on out until he cools off, which is another great matchup.
He was my first lock in. I thought he
absolutely.
So it was definitely between Montgomery and Carson for me.
And it's a changing of the guard in Seattle. This is usually a grinded out team, but Chris Carson has been a good play the first 3 weeks, but it's through the air. It's not on the ground. Yeah. It's so I go back and forth, but David Montgomery is definitely a safer play this week with no Tariq Cohen from here on out. He's a lock for 20 touches. Indy's defense has been really good, but I just there's a lot up in the air with how Chris Carson's used today. So I think I'd lean more towards David Montgomery.
I don't think there's anything left for me to give any input in. You guys kind of hit it all. I also did just get a little bit of news here. One of my sources is now telling me that the Chiefs and Patriots game will be held on Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern.
So that means the Patriots had more negative tests today. They tested them in the afternoon and at night on Saturday, and all their tests came back negative. And I think they were very contingent on playing tomorrow night or Tuesday on how they tested again today. So I guess it went well.
Some injury news, and actually most of it is good news. Joe Mixon is active. DJ Chark is active. Kareem Hunt is active. Terry McLaurin is active. All of them had been questionable throughout the week. If I had known this, Kareem Hunt would have been involved in my picks of the weeks. So I really, really like Kareem Hunt this week. But running back duds of the week, and as we start to see actives and inactives roll in, we will get them out for you. Oh, DeAndre Hopkins is in. All right, there we go. I love D-Hop. I love D-Hop this week.
Save my picks.
Yeah. Derek, who's your running back dud of the week?
You want to go quarterbacks?
Quarterback dud of the week, yes.
I will go with Drew Brees. And he had a great week last week. He threw for 290, 3 touchdowns. He absolutely ripped apart Green Bay, and it was at the hands of Alvin Kamara, absolutely dominating. And I think it'll be the same thing this week. There's no Michael Thomas again. But the Saints as a team have not won a game since 2018 without Michael Thomas in the lineup. Jared Cook is out today. There's just not that many options for Drew Brees to throw on the perimeter besides Alvin Kamara. Emmanuel Sanders could be thrusted into that wide receiver 1 role. And this is a Detroit defense that went without a takeaway the first 2 weeks and exploded last week with 3 picks against Kyler Murray. It's a confident group. Detroit's not even favored in the game. I think they're given 3 points. I think the Saints are just really going to struggle in general today. I don't really see them winning, and I think Drew Brees is a dud for QBs this week.
All right, so some more actives and inactives have rolled in, and this blows my mind. Chris Carson is active. Carlos Hyde is inactive. What?
Where did that come from?
Oh,
how did this happen? Does this change? Does this change anything for you in terms of between Montgomery and Carson, or is this, or are you still a little bit worried of Carlos Hyde, of Chris Carson, and what his role may actually be today?
It kind of does. I mean, Travis Homer, we saw him get some work in the playoffs last year in the first 3 weeks. He's a decent option to split, I guess, with Chris Carson. DJ Dallas, their 4th-round pick, he's a good pass catcher from Miami. They trust him in pass pro, so that's a plus, but he's still a rookie, and Pete Carroll doesn't like to play young guys. So Chris Carson must be healthy. That's just a risky play coming off the injury last week, but he's been really good through the air. So I guess I would lean back to Carson over Montgomery just because of the matchup. Indy's been lights out the first 3 weeks. I'd go with Chris Carson now with that news.
Yeah, I'm probably still going Montgomery because of the guaranteed volume, but I'm a little bit more okay with starting Carson if that's your inkling. But I would probably still look to play Monty, but it's a lot tougher.
Unreal! Oh my god, unreal!
Wow. Tom, who you got as your quarterback dud of the week?
So I actually got Dak this week versus the Browns, and it's not any problem with Dak himself. I just think that the Cleveland defense is just going to let Zeke walk into the end zone, I guess. I think this is going to be an absolute monster day for Zeke, and Dak's not going to have to throw too much down the road. I think it's going to be a 3-quarter game, and then the fourth quarter is just going to be all chew clock. So I think that's just going to hurt Dak's numbers in the long run.
Yeah, and it's weird because we've seen so many negative game scripts in Dak's favor. Now, the biggest question is the Cleveland Browns offense going to be able to put up enough points to continue that trend? One of the reasons why I love Kareem Hunt is that Dallas has been bleeding numbers to pass catching running backs. And also, if Dallas should be up by a bunch early, it's going to have to fade from what they want to do with Nick Chubb into what they are going to have to do with Kareem Hunt. It's one of the tougher games to predict, only because you've seen so much from Dallas that you think that they should be better than their record, but they're also a really, really horrible giving up of the lead from being 0-3. So
yeah,
it's tough to put your finger on Dallas this year.
Yeah, well, and just with Dak's numbers over the first 3 weeks, over the first 3 weeks, he threw for 39 times, 47 times, and then 57 times. That's not going to be the case in every week, and I just think this is going to be the week that he's not throwing, 40, 50 times a game.
They get Tyron Smith back today, too. They just announced that Lyle Collins out for there, but they do get back Tyron Smith, so they don't have to put in Brandon Knight and undrafted free agent Terrence Steele as their tackles. They need to stop putting so much pressure on Dak, and I understand why, because they've been down early in every single game, but they need to give that defense a breather. That secondary is awful, and they're just putting them back in the game when they're airing it out the way they have in the first 3 weeks. I agree with Tom. I think they're going to be way more in the ground today.
Well, you mentioned the secondary there. Not only is it terrible, but the guy that's been on that defense and anchoring down the secondary, Trayvon Diggs, he's questionable for today. I don't know if he's going to play or not, and if not, that's just going to hurt the Cowboys even more in this game.
My quarterback dud of the week is going to be Tom Brady. We saw him have a pretty decent game last week. He's going to be without Chris Carson this week. Chris Godwin this week. Oh, my God.
Still in your mind. Can't stop thinking about it.
This is what having 3 kids and no sleep does to you. Chris Godwin is out. Scotty Miller is questionable. I sort of like it as a really deep dart throw in DFS leagues. I do like Justin Watson. But there's just something about Brady that has looked a little off. Now, it could be the jersey he's wearing, but
those pewters.
The old pewters. Oh, that was atrocious. Those
way too much. Way too. You can do it. You can't have the entire uniform be pewter.
Oh my God,
that was tough to watch.
Yeah. Without those weapons, and they're going to be without Leonard Fournette, so it's going to be a big Ronald Jones week this week as well. But they're also playing against a really good defense. The Los Angeles Chargers have a pretty good defense, and so I'm just with everything with the 3 players being out, so much inconsistency. He hasn't been able to have Godwin and Evans healthy for more than 2 quarters so far this year. That trend's just gonna keep on going. So I'm fading Tom Brady this week. Running back duds of the week, Derek.
I'm gonna go with Joshua Kelly, and this is a guy that has been an interesting play the first 3 weeks, and he's garnered a lot of snaps. It's basically been worked up to a 50-50 split with Austin Eckler until last week. He fumbled, and we saw his snaps dramatically decrease immediately. He played 20 snaps last week. Eckler was at 58, and Eckler absolutely balled out. And it's not a good matchup this week. Tampa Bay has absolutely stuffed the run game. Joshua Kelly, you're kind of relying on a touchdown. You're relying on sheer volume, and he's a great stash in your fantasy leagues for later in the season. Still not sure if Austin Eckler is going to hold up, and I do think he will work his way back into a 50-50 split. It just didn't help that he fumbled last week. He's a guy I think he's up for 5,000 on DraftKings. There are way better options in that price range. I'd stay away from Kelly this week.
Yeah, and I mean, Josh Kelly was one of my my sleepers last week, but he fell victim to the fumble and bench. Unfortunately, there are just way too many coaches who still believe in that philosophy. But when you have Austin Eckler as your other running back, it's not like you can say, well, why wasn't Joshua Kelly getting the touches? Because Austin Eckler is still really, really good. And so they were able to not just fade him to the bench, but they were able to incorporate Austin Eckler more into their game plan. Your running back of the week, Tom.
Yeah, so I got Todd Gurley here versus the Green Bay Packers, and you look at Gurley's numbers over the past 3 weeks. He's had 14, 21, and 14 rushing attempts, which is solid touches. But that week that he had 21 was versus Dallas, and he got 61 yards, but only 6 fantasy points. And that was a game where they were trying to hold the lead and feed him the ball, and he just wasn't getting it done. And then we all know what happened in the fourth quarter with the onside kick and everything. I think that the Falcons are in this kind of drought almost, and they're not going to rely on Gurley. They're going to try and rely on Matt Ryan and Julio Jones and all of the great receivers that they've built around Matt Ryan. And they're going to try and get a hold on this game early and knock the Packers out as fast as they can, who are not going to go down easy. And I think that Gurley is going to get scripted out of this game, and I don't like him.
I saw a troubling stat for Todd Gurley owners. If he's available in your league, pick up Brian Hill. He had a really nice long touchdown run last week. In Gurley's last 100 rushing attempts, he's had 339 yards. In Brian Hill's last 100 attempts, he's had 441. Brian Hill is young, he's big, he's fast, and he just looks a lot better than Todd Gurley early on. And I think Gurley only played 52% of snaps last week. So long term, I don't really like his prospects.
Yeah, and also I think with Atlanta, and obviously things have changed with an 0-3 record, but this is still a team that I think if you ask most people, they're not an 0-3, your typical 0-3 NFL team. They could easily be 2-1. So when I'm looking at a team that has that, and especially now this year, just to be sure, there are 7 teams that are making the playoffs in each conference this year, right? Yep. So yes, that means there is going to be an extra wildcard team. It's not out of the realm of possibility that a 7-9 wild card team gets in there.
And the NFC, the NFC West is going to beat each other up.
Yep.
The East is getting one team.
Right.
And the Vikings
Did they really get a team, though? Like, is there a petition we can start to give their spot to someone more deserving?
So
they somehow got worse.
The funniest thing is that the Eagles haven't won a game this year, and they're half a game out of first place.
They gained ground last week. They're the only team not to lose, and they somehow gained ground last week. It is pathetic. How the NFC East got worse from last year? They got worse.
Yeah. So my issue with Todd Gurley is that I still think there are people that within Atlanta, they think that they can make a run at the playoffs. If 7-9 could get you in, 8-8 might get you into one of those 3 wildcard slots, which means 8-5 over your final 13 games isn't out of reach for a team that could easily be 2-1. Todd Gurley, I think they want him to be playing in December and if they get their way in January. They're going to be lighter on his load. I really, really do like the pickup of Brian Hill as well. My running back dud of the week, and again, this is someone who's, if you're in season long, it's almost impossible to take Miles Sanders out of your starting lineup. But on DFS, I'm not touching him at all. again with and again you're going to have to play the expanded slate because he does have the Sunday night game, but we just have not seen teams be successful on the ground against San Francisco. And with all of the weapons that are out for the Philadelphia Eagles, with Carson Wentz struggling the way that he has, I think they're just going to load the box up the entire game and make sure that Miles Sanders isn't the one to beat them. They're going to make Carson Wentz beat them tonight. So Miles Sanders is going to be someone, again, it's almost impossible to take him out of your season-long lineups, but he's not someone I'm looking for to really help my team get to that victory this week. Wide receiver duds. Derek, who you got?
We pounced on the Giants and the Rams and what that game will look like earlier, so I'm going to go with Cooper Kupp as a dud. In your season-long leagues, you probably have to play him. He's played really well. And last week he had over 100 yards and a touchdown, but the game script worked out perfectly. They were down 28-3 in the middle of the beginning of the third quarter, and they passed their way back into the game and scored 29 unanswered. And that's great, but that is absolutely not happening this week against the Giants. He might not be logging any work in the second half for all we know. This could easily be a 3 or 4 score game in the beginning of the second half. And this is a guy who got in the end zone last week, but he typically out of the slot, it's too unpredictable with how spread out that Rams team is on the perimeter. And I'm not willing to just almost rely on a touchdown from Cooper Kupp this week when I don't think the volume will be there. And he's, I think, the 7th most expensive wide receiver in DFS formats. That's just not a play I'm willing to make this week. I'm staying away from Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, I have the same sentiments. Tom, who you got?
Yeah, so I'm actually sitting here and changing up my script a little bit just because of how things are going and shaking out here on the show. So I'm going to go with Robbie Anderson this week as my wide receiver dud. This is a guy that's seen 5 or more targets throughout the first 3 weeks here, and he has caught 1 touchdown. He's averaging, it's looking like anywhere between 10 to 20 yards a catch. But that Arizona D is going to be a little stingier today, I think, and they're going to get to Teddy Bridgewater, and I think it's going to be a big Mike Davis day like you guys have talked about earlier. And I think that Robbie Anderson is going to be that guy left behind.
Yeah, so my wide receiver dud of the week is someone who, of the active players, especially on FanDuel, he's the 3rd most expensive player, and this goes in line with my Tom Brady dud of the week. That's going to be Mike Evans. He's going to see Casey Hayward I'm sorry. Casey Hayward shadowing him. If you take away 1 or 2 yard touchdown passes, Mike Evans hasn't done anything. I mean, when your entire stat line is 2 catches for 2 yards and 2 touchdowns, I mean, it has to raise a red flag. And for him to be, and again, it's going to be tough to take him out of your season-long lineup, but to have him as the 3rd most expensive active player on the main slate, no chance am I expecting a whole lot out of Mike Evans this week. Tight end duds, Derek.
You talked about Jimmy Graham, and I do think his prospects moving forward are good. He's a great number 2 tight end to pick up in your league, especially with Nick Foles in the mix, but this is not the week to play him just off matchup. Wildly, the Colts have given up 6 catches and 32 yards to tight ends on the season in 3 weeks. Darius Leonard is an absolute monster. He's an unbelievable cover linebacker. And, I mean, it's a matchup thing. I mean, they went against Kyle Rudolph and who else in Jacksonville? James O'Shaughnessy. Jimmy Graham's better than those guys.
And Chris Herndon.
Yeah, Chris Herndon. Oh my God, and Chris Herndon. Jimmy Graham's better than those guys, but the matchup is just a nightmare. Darius Leonard, him and Fred Warner are probably the two best cover linebackers in the league. I'm just staying away from Jimmy Graham this week, but with Nick Foles moving forward, he's a great stash in your bench. Don't play him this week.
Yeah, again, unless it's absolutely necessary. If you're one of those Travis Kelce owners, that was the only reason I had brought him up. And the reason why I brought him up is because he's still available in a lot of leagues for a reason. I think everyone has just been so burned by Jimmy Graham over the past 2 or 3 years that they're afraid to pick him up and to rely on him, and for good reason. So, yeah, I definitely not expecting a whole lot out of him this week. It was just sheerly out of necessity.
He's better with Nick Foles too.
Yes.
We don't have to worry about Mitch Trubisky. So
anyone's better with Nick Foles than Mitch Trubisky. So just ask Allen Robinson.
He's a happy man.
Yeah. Tom, who you got?
Yeah, so I got Zach Ertz this week as my dud for tight ends. Sorry, Derek. San Francisco defense is still really good, even though they're missing a bunch of their guys. I know they played the Jets and Giants past 2 weeks, but the Eagles offense doesn't look that much better than the Giants, who are much better than the Jets. And, Dallas Goedert still out, and a bunch of the Eagles wideouts. I know he's the only option. I'm getting this gut feeling that it's going to be a week where it's just going to be a lot more running and maybe not a whole lot of offense out of the Eagles in general. Yeah,
I'm going to go with Tyler Higby. Again, this is a game script. If the Giants have actually been okay against tight ends. Again, I mean the tight ends they've gone up against are Eric Ebron, Jimmy Graham, and whatever tight ends were out there filling in for George Kittle last week. But they've been pretty decent against tight ends. And with Gerald Everett being getting more of a snap count, with it being a heavily run favored game script this week, Tyler Higby is going to be someone that I would be fading. Real quick, let's start running through our sleepers. Quarterbacks. Derek, who you got?
I'm going with the mustache, Gardner Minshew. I do not like how everyone has been so quick to hop on the bandwagon, and now they're hopping off just as fast. This is a guy, yeah. He thrives being an underdog his whole career, his entire trajectory of his career. Last week, everyone's watched him on Thursday night without his best receiver, DJ Chark. He only saw seven catches for the first 2 weeks, but what he does to that offense is he takes the top off the defense, and that allows Gardner to spread the ball around, which he's done really well the first 2 weeks with Chark in the lineup. Last week, we saw Chris Conley in that role, in that X receiver role that Chark plays, and he had one of the worst games I've ever seen a receiver play. That's not going to happen this week. Cincinnati is not a good defense. He is a great play this week. Do not hop off Minshew for this week. I think it's an easy play. I think he's a top 10 guy this week.
Tom, who's your quarterback sleeper?
All right, the reason I had to change up the game script a little bit, I got Nick Foles. It's time to see what he can do in a full game. He threw 3 touchdowns last week in just the fourth quarter. I'm hoping that, the Colts defense is a really good defense, but A-Rob, Jimmy Graham, all the guys we've been talking about, I think it's just going to be a Nick Foles kind of day.
And my quarterback sleeper is someone we've talked about already a couple times. It's Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's the 23rd most expensive quarterback, and that's when you don't have Mahomes, Cam Newton, Aaron Rodgers, Matt Ryan, and Carson Wentz involved in those rankings. So Fitzpatrick is he's again, nothing else needs to be said. Running back sleepers, Derek.
I'm going to go with Ronald Jones in Tampa. We talked about that game, but no Leonard Fournette, so he doesn't have to compete with any work. And without Chris Godwin, he and Scotty Miller as questionable, he very well might be the second best pass catching option for Tom Brady today. I think he has a very high floor, just off sheer volume, and I think it's a decent play. It's a tougher matchup, but I just think they don't really have the options and have to lean on a guy like Ronald Jones today.
Tom, who you got?
If you don't want him, trade him to me. I got Kenyan Drake. I think it's about time this guy is going to start balling out. He got Carolina, not a great defense. We were already kind of talking about this a little bit earlier. I think that this is going to be the week that he's going to make fantasy owners want to keep him around.
My running back sleeper is Devin Singletary against Las Vegas. Again, Devin Singletary may not be in the sleeper category. So if you want, but the Vegas Raiders are just, again, they're bleeding points to the running back. We saw Sony Michel have a really good game. That tells you all you need to know about what the Raiders are allowing for running backs. But if you want something a little bit deeper, and again, this will be a dart throw DFS tournament play. That's Chuan Vaughn. Without Leonard Fournette there, apparently we've heard reports this week that Bruce Arians has said to Keyshawn Vaughn, "Your time is coming." That time may come today. In terms of his involvement, he's at the bottom of the barrel in terms of price on DFS, so he's going to be one of those dart throws that I'll look to get in one of my lineups, just as a way to allow me to spend up at other places. Wide receiver sleepers, Derek, who you got?
I hit last week on Braxton Berrios, and I'm going to go again with another very deep sleeper, and that's going to be Isaiah Ford, who also, I mentioned Gesicki earlier, who plays in the slot. So does Ford. There's a guy that they like. He had 76 yards against Buffalo in week 2. He didn't do much last week, but we've pounded on this point a lot, but it's Seattle. And we saw Cedric Wilson get 107 yards and 2 touchdowns. CeeDee Lamb had another 70 yards in the slot. I think Ford is a really good deep sleeper dart throw. I think he's 35 or $3,700 in DraftKings. If you need to save money in a place, he's a good wide receiver 3, I think, in DFS formats.
Yeah, and especially this week where we're expecting just points out of that game. Tom, who you got?
This kind of goes in tandem with my dud, but I got DJ Moore of the Carolina Panthers. You look at his stat line through the first 3 weeks, the weeks that they target him, such as week 2 versus Tampa Bay, he had 13 targets. He had 8 catches, 120 yards. The guy, when they throw him the ball, puts up numbers. And Ryan, before the show, we were talking about DJ Moore here. On DFS sites, he's right around, correct me if I'm wrong, the same price range as someone like Keelan Cole. So I think that if you're getting him at that price, that's going to be a really good pickup for you.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at he's a little bit more expensive on FanDuel, but he's $5,600 on DraftKings, just $100 more than AJ Green. Just so that's around the area that you're looking at. DJ Moore has not seen the target volume that everyone has expected DJ Moore to receive. The positive thing about DJ Moore so far this year has been the air yards. I think he's second in the NFL in air yards.
Yep.
So, which means when that connection starts clicking and those targets get back to what we usually see from DJ Moore, he's going to start producing. So he's someone who I have on a bunch of teams. The first 3 weeks has definitely worried me, but I'm not bailing. He's someone that I'm expecting to bounce back, and in leagues that I don't have him, I'm trying to acquire him. Tyler Boyd is my wide receiver sleeper of the week. He's now become the number one, even with AJ Green there. I do think T. Higgins is going to eventually eclipse AJ Green to become the number 2 there. But right now, Tyler Boyd, and he's just not getting enough credit to what his production has said about his game. We've seen now 2 weeks in a row Joe Burrow have to throw the ball 45 plus times. I can see this being a trend throughout the year where they're just going to look to get him rep after rep after rep, and his first read is Tyler Boyd. So I really, really, really like Tyler Boyd this week. Let's wrap it up with our sleeper tight ends.
I talked about him earlier. If you're fumbling around with Travis Kelce, I think Gronk's a good play this week. Just beating the Ronald Jones sentiment again. There aren't that many options. No Chris Godwin. Mike Evans is going to garner the most attention from that defense. Scotty Miller's questionable. I think off last week they're going to lean more on Gronk. He had six targets, 6 catches, played over 90% of the snaps. I would look at Gronk as a deeper play this week.
Tom, who you got?
Yeah, my tight end we already talked about when we were talking about the Kelce pickups. Robert Tonyan again. I think that he's just going to start becoming that red zone threat for Aaron Rodgers that he just hasn't really had in recent weeks.
Yeah, so my tight end sleeper of the week is going to be Dalton Schultz. So many people were excited about the prospects of Blake Jarwin this year. And Blake Jarwin went down in the first quarter of the year. And a lot of people were wondering whether or not this was then going to mean the elimination of the tight end in Dallas. That hasn't happened. They're playing against Cleveland, who has been much better against the run than they have been against the pass. Even though I do think they're going to look to incorporate Zeke more into the game plan this week, I really like what Dalton Schultz. They've given up a lot. I think they're 27th in the league against tight ends in terms of fantasy points giving up. So I really, really do like Dalton Schultz as a sleeper this week. We're going to quickly give you our favorite stacks of the week and our lock it in bet of the week. Let's get your stack of the week, Derek.
I'm going to go with Stafford and Galladay. We talked about it, but this is just a dream matchup, and no Marshawn Lattimore, no Janoris Jenkins. I think this is a great stack this week.
Tom?
We talked about mine a little bit already, but Kyler Murray and D-Hop, whenever the two get on the field, they just have a different type of connection.
Yeah, and I can't leave. And it's funny because a lot of us, we've been talking so much about the Miami side of the ball. Obviously you have to love what Russell Wilson, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf are going to do. But again, my stack, especially in terms of DFS, is going to be Ryan Fitzpatrick and Devonta Parker. They're going to have to play catch up all game and against a really bad secondary. What's the lock bet of the week for you this week, Derek?
I'm going to go with San Fran -7 against Philly. I don't really know why it's this close. I get that Doug is a good underdog pick in years past, but that's just not what this team is this year. They had one wide receiver practice on Friday, and that was Greg Ward. They're rolling out Greg Ward, 5th rounder, John Hightower, and practice wide receivers Deontay Burnett and Travis Fulgham.
Oof.
I think it's going to be a really rough game for the Eagles. I see them losing by 2 or 3 possessions.
How about you, Tom?
Yeah, so I think this is going to be a really rough week for the Raiders. So my lock's going to be Buffalo -8.5. I think that this is just going to be an all-out field day for Buffalo.
I only have it as 3. So
yeah, I was going to say I had a 3.
Oh shit!
If you're willing to lay 8.5, you gotta love laying only 3. So my lock of the week, and again, this shouldn't come as a surprise. I'm taking the over in Seattle, Miami. Right now, it's at 55.5. 55. Yeah, I'm taking the over. Just smash it. Guys, great week. Good luck in all of your fantasy leagues and your DFS that you play.
Thank you, Ryan. Good luck to you guys, and please, no more bad COVID news, please.
Yes. Let's let Casey in New England play. Let them play,
please.
It's better for everyone. All right, guys. Thanks again. Thanks for everyone watching. You can follow Derek on Twitter at Derek Mountain. You can follow Tom on Twitter at THB315. I am on Twitter at rstern33. Follow Backsports Page on all social media at Backsports Page. Check out backsportspage.com for all the great content and archives to all the podcasts and web shows that we got going on there. And guys, let's do this again next week.
Sounds good.
Sounds good to me. I'm about it.
All right. Be well.